1 month. That is all the time left before Sonic Movie 3 officially hits theaters and blesses audiences worldwide with peak fiction. You know, it's really crazy to think how we started. Just think back to the trailer that released in 2019. After the major disappointment that was Sonic Forces and the very underwhelming release of Team Sonic Racing, we needed a miracle, and that trailer was definitely not a miracle. The movie was dead on arrival, everyone hated it. But one design change later, and the narrative around the Sonic film started to change, and flash forward to the actual film's release date, and it is a hit. People love it, it does pretty well at the box office, and then movie 2 even ups the ante with higher praise, higher earned revenue. Paramount obviously struck gold, and now the long anticipated movie 3 is finally upon us, a film that promises to implement a lot of SA2 inspiration and introduce Shadow to the general audience, while simultaneously delivering a Avengers level event. But what if I told you that there were official Sonic movie media that doesn't really get a lot of recognition among fans of both the films and games? The media I am of course referring to is the Sonic movie novelizations. Let's take a step back. What are novelizations? When a new big blockbuster is coming out, often the owners of the movie will want to further profit off of it via external material. Obviously, this can take the form of toys, tie-in video games, comic books, but a common form of extra revenue are novelizations, which are basically a version of the film script but reworked to fit the format of a novel. Now, this can sound pretty pointless because obviously movies are made for a visual medium, and not a lot of people are willing to pay to basically experience the same story twice. However, the appeal of novelizations is that the books are often based on earlier drafts of the script, meaning a lot of additional scenes or extra details can be found in these novels for die-hard fans to sink their teeth into, and because of the freedom of the medium, the authors can often add a lot more clarification to certain plot points and further flesh out certain characters. Ironically, making novelizations the definitive way of experiencing a story. Personally speaking, I love film novelizations. I own plenty, and often not, they give me a newfound appreciation for stuff in the movie that didn't really have time to get as fleshed out as I wanted it to be. And as you've definitely guessed by now, I do own the 2 Sonic movie novelizations, and I have read them twice over. While the books are, for the most part, really faithful to the movies, there are a lot of interesting details and scrapped ideas left on the cutting room floor that we're going to be diving into today. But before we do, if you happen to enjoy this video, please leave a like, it helps out a lot, and if you want more Sonic content, be sure to subscribe, I upload pretty frequently. With that, let's begin. So one thing I want to clarify off rip is that we're not going to be going over every single minute change. The books often have a lot of dialogue deviations and different ways of handling action scenes, but what we're going to be looking at specifically are interesting details that are actually worthy of discussion that can give us deeper insight into this universe, or clarify certain concepts in the movies that didn't make the final cut. With that said, let's start with the movie 1 novelization. So the first thing I want to get into that I found pretty interesting is the way Sonic is characterized in the books. Now, Sonic in the books is still pretty one-to-one with the way he is portrayed in the films, but what I personally found interesting is that movie Sonic has a lot of catchphrases and dialogue reflective of the old American Sonic. His personality of that of early Archie, Sad AM, Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog was a clear inspiration to the author because there's a lot of catchphrases and nods and winks to the way the character used to talk. For example, Sonic often uses his titular catchphrase, way past cool. Robotnik is called Robotnik throughout the entire duration of the book. And while in the movie, Sonic discovers chili dogs for the first time, in the book, it's clarified that Sonic has always loved chili dogs and it's his favorite food. I honestly really like this. A lot of you guys will know that I prefer Japanese Sonic over American Sonic, but the films are obviously just doing their own thing, and seeing this character talk like any previous iteration made this feel a lot more familiar, and I did appreciate it. But we're not actually done with early 90s American inspiration. Robotnik's egg-shaped drones in the movies actually have a name in the book. They're called Botniks, which, if that doesn't sound familiar, is a obvious nod to Badniks, which was the term that Eggman's robots would be referred to in the early 90s. And Sonic would make the name official later on with the way he comes up with nicknames on the fly. In the novel, Eggman's robots are called badniks throughout the entire second half of the book, further highlighting the obvious early 90s inspiration that the author implemented, which I personally did appreciate. It's actually interesting because in the movie, badniks is a blink and you'll miss it Easter egg that appears during the dancing scene, but the book actually makes the full commitment to the name, and I much prefer that. Flash forward to the interrogation of Tom Wachowski. During the scene where Robotnik is pressing Tom to enter his house because he's suspicious that the creature could be inside, it's actually clarified in the book that Robotnik is fully aware of Sonic's presence in the house and has him spotted on infrared cameras. And that slight recontextualization made the scene a lot more intense. Again, it's a minor change, and that's what the majority of these are, but I do find it interesting how the author will just not be afraid and very unashamed to add some spice to the script. One punch to a egomaniac later, and Tom and Sonic are officially on the run, and here's a rather major change that I really liked. Because of Tom's involvement with Sonic and having disobeyed Robotnik's instruction, he is branded a fugitive of the law. But Sonic manages to guilt trip him to help him get to San Francisco, and the entire time, while Tom is a fugitive, the movie kind of wants you to forget about the ramifications of Sonic is successful in escaping to the Mushroom World. After that, Tom will very much get arrested because you can't evade the entire government for very long, and his name wouldn't be cleared. But actually, in the book, this plot point is addressed, where Sonic explains that if Tom successfully helps him escape to the Mushroom World, Robotnik will have no evidence that Tom was aiding in a terrorism attack, thus clearing his name. Now, I do appreciate this being addressed, but this explanation doesn't really make a lot of sense, because regardless if the government doesn't have any hardcore proof, Tom still evaded arrest and assaulted a federal officer. But hey, some explanation is better than none. Next, let's talk about everyone's favorite addition to the movieverse, Agent Stone. In the first movie, Agent Stone is a Robotnik lackey who is like heads over heels for the guy. He is shown to be very loyal, very enthusiastic, and is often the brunt of the Doctor's abuse. However, in the book, Agent Stone is actually nowhere near as Robotnik crazed as his movie counterpart. In fact, he's played pretty straight and has a very stone cold demeanor, and doesn't even really get assaulted by Robotnik at all. I think this was actually the initial version of Agent Stone before they played him up for comedy, and I will explain that when we get to a later change in the novelization that backs up this theory. But now let's talk about the bar scene. In the movie, the bar fight initiates because a biker just rolled up on Sonic and Tom and apparently has a problem with hipsters. And Sonic takes it a step further, tries to smash the bottle over the guy's head. It doesn't work, and a brawl ensues. This is a pretty minor change, but I found it funny how this actually all starts in the book. Sonic accidentally bumps into the same biker guy while he's dancing, and the biker guy basically just yells at him for a bit, and Sonic just jumps straight to giving him a full-on wedgie in front of all of his friends. And then the bar fight starts. This version of Sonic in the book is honestly a lot more fun than the movie version because he has a lot of that early 90s charm of him just being a complete dickhead, and I kind of love it. But while I have been saying the book overall does make a lot of positive changes, there is one thing that I feel it fails overall. And that's the emotional argument that Tom and Sonic has when Sonic finds out that Tom is planning on leaving Green Hills. And obviously Sonic is upset by this because he's never had the privilege of having a home, and he thinks Tom is wasting what seems to be a perfectly good place and deserting people who need him. It was a pretty decent scene in the film, but in the book, Sonic is already aware that Tom is leaving since pretty much the start of the story. So when you get to this scene, it kind of just comes off as Sonic just randomly deciding to be a crybaby out of nowhere, rather than being told a huge revelation that hits him deeply. I think this must have been based on an earlier script because I can find no other reason why the author would make a change like this. Either way, it was definitely a half-assed conflict in the movie to just basically raise the tension, and it's the same way in the book, so either way, I don't really care. Now getting to the highway fight scene. In the movie, Sonic rolls into an accidental spin dash and destroys one of Robotnik's vehicles, but is later pursued by a bomb that later takes him out and severely injures him. This is all pretty radically different in the book version. Instead of rolling into an accidental spin dash, Sonic actually performs a thunderclap, sending blue electricity that directly at Robotnik's van, frying it. And the energy it took to use his attack wears him out completely and is what makes him unresponsive once they get to Maddie's. This is another change I'm not a big fan of. The spin dash is a really iconic move and it was nice seeing it on the big screen, and a lot of you know how I feel about electricity trying to be movie Sonic's new element, and performing a thunderclap is just, I'm not really a big fan of it. But now we've arrived at San Francisco where another change is imminent. This is probably one of the larger changes in the book, and that's the fact that Rachel and JoJo are nowhere to be found. They are not characters, they are completely cut out of the book. And that prompts the question, well, where is Maddie staying at during all of this? Well, she's staying at an apartment. Now, this might strike you as odd, and for good reason, because the reason she goes to San Francisco is to scout out new places. But she's in an apartment, so I find that very strange. That doesn't track. A hotel would have made a lot more sense. But while the book are creating more plot holes, it's definitely fixing a few that the film has. What am I talking about? Well, one thing that always irked me about the movie is when they arrive at the Transamerica building and Sonic tells Maddie and Tom that security is guarding the roof and so they have to sneak him in. I've always been bugged by this because couldn't Sonic just run up the building and get to the roof? Well, the book actually addresses this by explaining that the roof is fenced off from the ledge, making it impossible to run all the way up. Minor change, but one that, again, I really liked. But while we've done a lot of minor changes, this is easily, without a shadow of a doubt, the largest change in the book, and one that I honestly drastically preferred than the movie. So in the film, Sonic's entire arc is not running away anymore. In the beginning, he's forced to run away and leave Lone Claw to die at the hands of the echidnas. He's been running all of his life evading detection. He has to run away from Robotnik and flee to San Francisco. But at the end, he stands up for everything he loves and refuses to leave his family at the hands of Robotnik. A decent arc, but I find the book's arc to be a lot more fascinating. In the novelization, Sonic's entire arc centers around his powers. Because of the chaotic energy that's basically fucked up this hedgehog's entire life, he's viewed these powers that he's had as a burden and something that can only be caused for destruction or utilized for it by someone else for a very nefarious goal. However, by the end, he realizes that chaos, by nature, can be used for good, that everything that makes him who he is doesn't have to be a burden, doesn't have to be a catalyst for destruction, but rather something that can do good, that can build. I found that a lot more fascinating, and at the end where he takes back his power from Robotnik and fully becomes one with his electrical energy and can finally fully control his chaos powers. Not only was there emotional payoff, but there was physical payoff as well, which I personally really enjoyed. And we're not done with big changes either. So in the film, Robotnik uses one of Sonic's quills to supercharge his super big jet thingy, and that's what allows him to keep up with Sonic and pursue him. But the book takes this one step further. Robotnik doesn't just use the quill to power up his machine, but it actually powers him up as well, giving him this kind of electrical super form, elevating him to godlike status. And if this sounds familiar, you are correct. This is exactly what happens to Robotnik at the end of movie 2. So it's really interesting that movie 2 basically took a concept that was done in the book prior to it. It makes me wonder if the whole Robotnik god thing was supposed to be done in the first movie, but it was later cut and saved and repurposed for the later film. Again, this is just what makes Novelization so cool. You can see a lot of scrapped ideas and repurposed ideas and kind of like do a guessing game of what the original intent of certain things were and where certain things fit. It's nice. The third act battle plays out mostly the same in the film, except instead of hitting Robotnik's jet a million times, Sonic does another generic boring thunderclap, which yes, I do not like, and the day is saved. I've spoken earlier about stuff that really bothered me about the first movie, and there was one thing that really, dare I say it, grinded my gears with the first movie's ending. And that was the complete disappearance of Agent Stone. Agent Stone is Robotnik's fully trustworthy 100% lackey, and not a lot of people notice it, but he just kind of disappears in the second act and is never brought up or mentioned again. Well, that's actually really different in the book. In the movie, Commander Waters pays a visit to the Wachowski's residence, and he gives him an Olive Garden card, informs him that Robotnik is basically just being wiped from history and they don't have to worry about him anymore, and inquires about the existence of Sonic. This character is completely swapped out with Agent Stone in the book. It's actually Agent Stone who's the one who visits the Wachowskis, informs them of Robotnik's disappearance, ensures their safety, and inquires about Sonic. And I much prefer this. It actually gives the characters some sort of resolution, but I completely understand why this was changed, and if you remember earlier, I said that the stone cold straight-faced lackey that Agent Stone is in the book was supposed to be how he was originally before they changed him to be a lot more enthusiastic about serving Robotnik. Well, I think this ending was actually in the original script back when Stone was supposed to be that character, but when he later got changed to be a lot more memorable and played up for comedic effect, they changed it to Commander Walters. The last major difference at the end is what the Wachowskis are gifted. In the film, it's an Olive Garden card. Whatever. In the book, however, it's a government radio hotline. I think this is so they can have an easy time contacting the government if they have any questions or any concerns over their safety. But normally an agent would give them a number. I don't know why they gave him an entire frequency, but this was to set up how Tom and Sonic are going to be partners. They're going to be a heroic pair who stops crime together, and I am so glad they scrapped this concept. It's so fucking stupid. So yeah, that were all of the changes that the movie One Novelization made, and I was not lying to you. A lot of them are pretty insightful and intriguing deviations. Now, while the book changes were cool and there were some improvements it had over the final film, I do prefer the story we end up getting because it flowed a lot more naturally, and some of the book changes, like I already explained, just do not work. But yeah, it's a pretty interesting read. I'd honestly recommend you guys checking out the first movie novelization if you got the chance. It's dirt cheap, very easy to read. I mean, this is a franchise for kids, so it's like a first grade reading level. Go check it out. But now we're getting to the movie 2 novelization. Starting off, some select deleted scenes from the movie ends up making its way into the novelization, which is pretty common for these types of books. The first example of this is Robotnik getting high. Yes, if you were unaware, the second movie was initially supposed to open with Robotnik just getting high off of mushrooms, and this led him to formulate his master plan on how to build a beacon to escape. And you can guess why this was cut for obvious reasons. I mean, promoting drugs to children is probably not the smartest idea a kid's film can make. The second deleted scene is Tails GTing Wade's car. If you remember, in the second movie, Tails shows up in a police cruiser, and he uses it to help Sonic get away from Knuckles. The last time we saw him, he was eyeing it while Wade was distracted, and we get to see the full breaking in process kind of just played out in the book, and I think this was cut so it would make Tails not seem too heartless or give audiences a bad first impression of the character. Because Tails is precious, and having him rob someone of their vehicle is definitely a choice. And the next deleted scene after that makes its way in the book is a scene where Stone informs Robotnik that the US government have erased his identity and frozen all of his assets and bank accounts. I enjoy this scene. I mean, every scene with Robotnik and Agent Stone is a treat, but I do understand why this was cut because of pacing issues. If it seems like I'm going too fast, that's because the book in movie 2 is a lot more faithful than the movie novelization was, which I found interesting because I would assume it would be the opposite, because movie 1 has way more scrapped ideas and cut content that got completely transformed along with the design change than movie 2 does. And then we have another deleted scene after that, where shortly after fleeing Knuckles and Robotnik, Sonic and Tails come across Wade, and Sonic explains who Wade is, and I really like this line, and it's honestly unfortunate that it didn't make the final cut, where Tails questions Wade's intelligence and Sonic is like, don't underestimate him. And then Wade messes up and he's like, but don't overestimate him either. I don't know, I've kind of always really liked that line. I've liked this as the first time I heard in the deleted scene. But our first change that's not a deleted scene comes in the form of plot clarification, where Mobius actually gets name dropped in the book and is clarified to be the home of all anthro creatures. I'm sure Game Apologist is just screaming into the sky right now with tears of joy. Now, this is a cool change. However, one thing that I find odd is how is Mobius the home place of all anthro characters when these creatures are all aliens that come from different points of the galaxy? Is Mobius the entire intergalactic place that doesn't include Earth? I'm confused. Is the entire universe Mobius, or they probably didn't think about it, and honestly, we shouldn't either. And then another slight change shortly follows, where instead of being apprehensive about joining Sonic, Tails is actually full throttle, like, yes, I want to help you, Sonic, take me with you. Which I do think is better and fits the character more, because in Sonic 2, that's what Tails was. He followed Sonic out of admiration and enthusiasm, and that's very much what Book Tails does. I mean, who wouldn't want to follow their hero? One drastic change that I think a lot of people will appreciate will probably boost up movie 2 book sales by a very wide margin is the fact that the wedding subplot is significantly trimmed down in the book. I'm talking about like barely there at all. Randall is a nothing character. Rachel gets like 5 lines. Jojo isn't in this book either. Man, Jojo can't catch a break in the written word. Yeah, no, the majority of the wedding subplot is just completely missing, and I think it allows the story to flow much better. Fast forwarding to the ice cap fight scene, and it's extended a little bit with Tells and Robotnik actually going at it, and the former hacking into the Eggmobile and tripping Robotnik up, and Robotnik being infuriated that someone has a similar intellect to him, and is there trying to outsmart him. I really like that. Now that I see that in the book, I have no idea what that wasn't in the movie, how we didn't have at least one scene of Robotnik acknowledging and being infuriated with Tells' high IQ. Because I'm pretty sure both of these characters have the exact same levels of intellect. He did have the whole I'm the outsmarter part in the movie, but that was nothing. But yeah, Sonic and Tails, they crashed the wedding. That's still in the book. But then there's a very weird change. This is probably the most bizarre change in the novel. So Commander Waters was not in the first book. I should clarify. He was not there at all, but obviously being more of a major player in the second film, he needs to show up somewhere in the second novelization. And both novelizations are not canon to each other because the first book is based on an earlier version of the movie 1 script and certain stuff would get retconned and changed. Movie 2 bases its rules and world building off of what the first movie did. But then we have this weird scene where Commander Waters is introduced for the first time in either novelization, and it's revealed that he was actually Agent Stone in the final scene of the book, and he was using fake credentials for some reason. What? So I can understand the reasoning of this. This is so people who primarily read the first book aren't confused when this random character comes in and takes credit for what another character did in a prior story. But this feels very pointless because there's already a lot of inconsistency between novelizations because like I said, the second book is based off of the first movie, not the other way. I don't know. This is a very weird change. Switching over to a positive change, and that is the reaffirmation of Game Knuckles inside the second book. Well, what do I mean by that? One thing that I detest about Movie Knuckles is how they've taken away so much of what made the game character so interesting, that being his sworn duty to guarding the Master Emerald in his isolation as the last of his kind. But the book actually makes an effort to amend this, with Knuckles clarifying that he wants to use the Master Emerald once it's complete to raise the capital temple of his home out of the sunken ruins and into the sky. Because obviously Angel Island doesn't exist in the movieverse, so this is the closest they could get, and I really do appreciate this. And it's moments like these where it's clear that the author was a lot more of a fan of the games than the movie writers are. It was just like going back to back to back with consecutive good changes, because the book also makes another good change, and that is the fight with GUN. In the film, it's a team up between Rachel and Maddie, and I don't necessarily have a problem with this on concept. I think the scene is fine enough, but I always hate how it just made the gun agents look super incompetent and not at all like a threat, and it just goes on for way too long. Whereas in the book, it's a three-way team-up between Tom Wachowski, Sonic the Hedgehog, and Maddie as they fight through a hallway of gun soldiers. This scene was a lot more energetic and flowed a lot better and had a lot more cool exchanges between the gun commander and his 3 targets. I just don't understand why this wasn't in the film. If this was cut, I have to ask why. Look, I get Rachel, I love Rachel, but she did not need all of the screen time that she had in the second movie. Yeah, let's move on. So next is another deleted scene that didn't make its way into the final cut of the movie, and that is a conversation that Wade has with Tom, where Wade reports to his best friend that the Mean Bean Cafe is actually a secret lair for Robotnik. This is another scene that I think was cut for pacing issues, but it's a very integral scene because right before the third act, Tom, Maddie, and Commander Waters all fly to Green Hills, and you have to wonder how they even knew to go back here. Well, it was originally because they had got their information from Wade, so they knew where to go once Robotnik was back on the prowl. Switching over to a minor change, so now we are at the third act. Again, the book is very faithful to the second movie. There's not a lot of big plot deviations to talk about, but the tornado actually has its name in the book. In the film, it was just a nameless red biplane, so it was nice to actually see it get referred as the tornado in some version of the story. But yeah, the third act plays out 1 for 1, and then we get to the scene where the Master Emerald is restored. In the film, it's Knuckles who fixes the Master Emerald, but in the book, the scene is actually a lot better and a lot more emotionally resonant. Well, Knuckles is having doubt about his quest, now he's been misled, but Sonic is the one who cheers him up and is the one who actually fixes the Master Emerald himself, restoring balance to chaos. And this is the one scene across both movies, across both books, across every single official piece of Sonic movie media that actually felt like a scene from the games, that actually felt like a scene that embodies what Sonic is supposed to be, which is a mythical inspiration and a catalyst for the change and growth of the people around him. This scene was nice. I really did enjoy this scene. It's a shame that it wasn't in the film at all. But yeah, that's basically it. But one last change to talk about with the second novelization is the lack thereof. It's actually a removal. You know the post-credit scene where we get confirmation of Shadow from movie 3? That's actually not in the second book. And it's really interesting because the Tails post-credit scene was in the first novelization, and so now this has given me a theory, and I think the post-credit scene with Shadow was a very last-minute addition to the movie. Because in the first film, they made and rendered an entire model for Tails, whereas with Shadow, it was actually just a repurposed supersonic model but color-coded to Shadow's design. So that leads me to think that this was actually a last-minute change, which I think is pretty cool. But yeah, there we have it. That was the end of this video. That's all the changes the novelizations do make for the movies. And wasn't this fun? This is just so cool. I really, like I said, I am a novelization collector. I collect a lot of the novel tie-in for all of my favorite games and movies, and it does such a good job of further expanding on certain concepts and bringing them to the forefront and giving us insight into what earlier versions of the script looked like. And I honestly prefer the second novelization to the second movie because the second novelization actually flows a lot more better and has a lot more plot clarification. And yeah, it's just overall, this is a great time, and I hope you guys found this as interesting and entertaining as I did. And with movie 3 on the horizon, if you guys want me to do the same thing when Sonic movie 3 comes out, where I read that novelization if we get one and just go through the differences between film and book, do let me know. But yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you have, do leave a like button. And again, it helps out. It really means a lot. And be sure to subscribe for more Sonic videos because I post pretty frequently. And lastly, I have a Sonic audio drama coming out on December 31st, Sonic Evolution. This is an audio drama that I've worked really hard on and that the voice cast did a great job. It's gonna be a pretty bulky ride. It's gonna be a pretty bulky project, and I can't wait. I can't wait for it to be out. If you want to be there when it premieres, make sure you subscribe and you have notifications on. But yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed, and peace out.